Alrighty, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today on day 4 of Open Education Week. I see many familiar names and I'm glad to have you back. It's a great lineup today and we're kicking it off this morning with Stefanie Schaefer. So Dr. Stefanie Schaefer is from SUNY Broome Community College. She's an instructor in the English department there and she will be sharing about her experience integrating open educational resources into her writing classroom. So welcome, Stefanie.
Yes, thank you for the wonderful introduction. So today I'm going to be talking about using an open educational resources using 2 specific websites in general, just integrating those right into my writing classroom and why I decided to do that. I feel like there's a really important process that I went through when thinking about using open educational resources. So again, just a little bit about me. I've been an adjunct instructor for the last 10 years at 2 different colleges. I've worked at Lackawanna College for a year, and then I've worked primarily at SUNY Broome Community College teaching College Writing 1. I've also worked for the last 2 years at Southern New Hampshire University as a graduate instructor. I received an OER grant from the University of Buffalo in 2018. And as I was talking about in the beginning, you may have come into that conversation. I actually teach math in the daytime. I teach at a high school, and then I teach writing at night. So I went through this journey of trying to figure out if open education resources would be very useful for me. So what I did is I used the idea of student feedback. I was listening to my students. And through listening to my students, I knew that I needed to find and adopt OER materials. I wrote my own assignments based on the OER materials that I found, and I'll also talk about what I'm thinking about doing in the future now that I've used OER materials with my students for the last 3 years. So just so you know, a lay of the land, many of you have gone through a variety of webinars this week about OER. We know that we're going for materials that are in the public domain or open license. So we want to look at materials where we can use them. We don't have to worry about possible copyright infractions with that. So we're looking at things that would be in the public domain where the copyright ownership is waived, or with open license where the copyright ownership is retained, but maybe we might be able to share it, we may not be able to share it, we may be able to remix it, we might not be able to remix it, we may be able to use it commercially, we may not be able to use it commercially. So all those different parts of public domain and open license are an important part of OER. So when did I decide to do OER? And it really started out being a young college instructor and being at a college at SUNY Broome, probably my first year. A student came up to me and said to me, "Ms. Schaefer, you know your textbook is $80 and I just can't afford it." And when I heard that, I understood it on a deep level. I was working 5 or 6 jobs myself at that point. And I was a person in college that was borrowing other people's books and trying to find the textbook because I couldn't always afford the textbook myself. So I knew what $80 meant to that student. $80 could be like 16 lunches for a student. $80 could be part of a rent. $80 could be gas money to get to the school. $80 at that time was 10 hours of work. So I had to find materials that they would be able to access. That's what I realized deeply, that I needed to do that for my students so that they would be able to have the same type of success that other students would be able to do. And this becomes an access issue. When we require people to buy a textbook, they may not be able to afford it. And when we look at Hilton's study in 2016, he did a synthesis of 16 studies, and they found out that you could achieve learning outcomes and save money for the students by using OER in the classroom. And then our students come into the classroom, and let's say we wanted them to buy this book. We already make assumptions whether they're going to be prepared for college or unprepared for college. And then I started to step back and think about, what am I trying to teach here? What am I trying to inspire? And what I've had students say to me before is, in their first initial writings with me, is you're not prepared to go to college, or college isn't for you, or it hasn't been for your peers, or for your family, or for your community, or once you get to college, you'll fail. So then they weren't able to afford the $80 textbook. So now they're at a different step here. And what that causes is an equity and diversity issue. When we require these traditional textbooks, we're basically saying to students, if you can't afford it, then you're not prepared to come into the class. And what it does, and this is in a study of Chinese students, Zhang did a study of Chinese students, OER lessened the students' writing anxiety because they knew that they had access to those materials, and they were able to write from those materials that they had. So what if our students come in already with other struggles, like the ability to read and write, or the ability to access to technology that can be, that is found in this Kadada and Tasha Babala study, or the ability to follow through on commitments? What if they have those issues as well? Then it becomes an accessibility issue. With a traditional textbook, they may only have those textbook materials, and they may not have the ability to have that text be read to them, or to have that ability to look at its text and then write right from it, just by changing a tab. So then OER can provide that accessibility by giving the ability to show students where they can find a screen reader, so then the text reads to them. And now they're able to understand what the material of your course is much better because they're listening to it. So now it's now you're providing literacy in a variety of formats. You're making it multimodal for students. And that's really empowering, because now, instead of just being, having to try to find a book and read and navigate through a book, which is always an important skill, now you're opening up the world of writing for a larger variety of people, for people that may have, dyslexia and are having difficulty just getting through that text. Now you're opening it up and making it more accessible for more people. And even in the terms of the writing, something like voice typing can change somebody's world. They can now write papers and be able to do that. So when we look at our traditional materials versus OER, those are the three things that stand out to me. I want to make my course be accessible. I want students to access it and be able to have it, and then it'd be affordable for them. I wanted to be able that they have a wide, diverse amount of perspectives to be inspired by. And that's what OER did. That's what OER did when I was in the course. So I said to myself, what if as an adjunct instructor, I hand them the tools for success on day one and let everybody start out the same place? So when you look at my course, I'm just going to go to my course. That's exactly what it is. So this is just week 2. All of the information is linked right for them right there. And then they can respond and do their assignments right in a week folder. And it's right there. And what I'll do is, once we get to I won't release all the folders at once because that can get a little overwhelming, but I'll release folders once a week. And then by the time in the middle of the semester, I'll be like, oh, okay, now I can release more folders and have students work at the pace that best fits them. So I had to start thinking about my overall course objectives. What am I trying to teach when I teach College Writing 1? And I summarize it like this. As a beginning college writing course, I want students to go from the me to the we. I want them to see how they can react to things, but then how they can integrate multiple sources into their paper. So using OER as an instructor models this process for the students. They see how you can transition from just reacting to articles to starting to take information from the outside world and bringing it all together. So my materials become the artifacts to build a great course experience for my students. And my students start seeing the possibilities of different perspectives that they may have never read or never realized. And the OER built materials that I have used from the SUNY online system allowed me to have those artifacts that really gave the course objectives in that way. So before I knew about OER, I didn't always know about that. So as a young instructor, I just started going online and trying to find different places that I could find articles that would illustrate my points. And it took a lot of time to do that. And of course, just like any web page, you go on the web page one day and it's right there and can access it. And then the next day, the link is different. And that required a lot of overhaul semester to semester. I was thinking there has to be an easier way to do this. Like I can't just always be trying to redesign everything and find new articles every semester that I can use. And so that's when I really transitioned to using OER. OER just simplified the process for me, and having something curated already, I just looked through a variety. I had to do a balance of that. I had to think, okay, can I find a curated OER resource? Well, I need to build something myself. And when I started really looking into the SUNY OER stuff, I was like, this is perfect. I really don't have to modify this as much to have my articles all in one spot. So I was quite a beginner with it. I had to just go through and try to find resources. Then I adopted something when I heard about the University of Buffalo grant program. I adopted 2 resources and then created assignments based on those resources. So that's exactly what I did. So first, look at your course objectives and then see if your materials match what students need to know. So Hutchins recently in 2020 wrote a great article about how there was an integration of reading and writing resources. So a couple of those pieces of advice that I really resounded with me was creating your own resources or finding one that's useful to your setting. And also that idea of creating a master list of assessments, of assignments and assessments that will meet your course objectives. I really strongly promote having a computer lab when you're in person. That's really great because then you can just have students access the assignments right in class, and you can help them with those technology bugs that they may have in the beginning of the semester, trying to figure out how do I navigate through your Blackboard course. So having a computer lab allows them all to pull up the article and look at it together in class and be able to read and react together to an article. That's been very helpful to have something where they have the devices right there. So the 2 resources that I decided on are the thematic reading anthology and the guide to writing. So as a writing instructor, I needed something that was like a guide to writing that would have basic information about higher order level and lower level errors. I needed that. So this is the guide to writing. The guide to writing is so great because it goes right from the beginning of grammar and then goes right up to research, how to do that, how to do different types of citation. Has a lot of really great links. If I have a student that's really struggling in colons, I can just say, hey, you're having a problem with writing colons in your paper. Here's the link right here. And I put that right in my feedback so that they can go ahead and link right into that. Same thing with systematic reading anthology. I have that integrated in my course. And I've selected videos and articles that I feel really align with the objective of what type of rhetorical mode I'm using at that point. So I'll use, a lot of the articles on consumer debt. I've used the Sagala Shah article about School Days of an Indian Girl. Her stories are great. I've also used the inspired writer versus the real writer. And then I also open it up and have students react to other articles within the SUNY writing anthology. Like, for example, they like the internet sending a SWAT team to my mom's house. I had a couple people react to that. They thought that was interesting. And there's just a wide variety of articles. And it shows that writing isn't just what you're doing in writing class. Writing is what you're going to use in all classes. So having an anthology that's built with a variety of different topic areas really helps with engagement, so that it's not just literature they're looking at, but they're looking at writing and how it can look different in different disciplines, which is a big part of teaching a college writing one course. So these are a variety of other OER sites that you can also look at. SUNY OER website has other anthologies too that are really, really great, that you may find really align with what you want to use. You can go to the OER Commons, and then I'll also give these links to you at the end of the session. The library, the Montana State Library website, the CUNY Academic Commons, all of those OER sites are really great. Yes. And Barbara just said writing in all classes and careers, and I agree with that. Exactly. So especially in that college writing one, you want them to see how writing can look different, how research writing might look different in a different type of field or area, and doing, having an anthology that already has everything listed out by topic allows you to do that quite simply. So then the next part is, as a writing instructor, I have to read all these articles and create questions that help them find evidence in the article. I try to create kind of some standard questions that I always ask. So I may say to them something like, how did you feel when reading the article? Did anything stand out to you? Just those are like very basic questions just to get them to start to react. And then more of a specific question that I may want them to answer. Like for this one, it was the inspired writing, like how has your writing process been in previous years? Has it always been easy to write? Within each of those assignments, I also have a rubric, and I think this is a relatively recent update, at least at SUNY Broome. I've created digital badges for every week. So if students achieve the assignments and are passing their assignments in that week, they get a little picture of me, a little Bitmoji of me. And I know it seems a little bit silly that you would get a little picture of me, like the Bitmojis you've seen, the little cartoons of me. But they love that type of stuff. It just is actually very motivating, even though it may seem a little bit elementary. They do like that. And as a writing instructor that has about 20 students in my class, I also do a lot about just having an unlimited number of attempts. I know that's not for everybody. Maybe not everybody wants to teach in that style, but I actually like having that dialogue go on in the paper a couple of times. So being able to point out that just in my own writing style is like being like a kind of like a little bit of an editor and a little bit of a coach, point out to an error and tell them about why this is an error, and then have them resubmit it and kind of go through that process. And I've noticed that students really then end up writing really great, and they learn from that. They see where I'm pointing out specifically what they're doing, what they're making errors on, and then they're using that by sandwiching, in positive and that constructive feedback. They're able to write better by the end of the semester and write things that are really, really great. So there's, of course, a couple of considerations for this when you're using OER in your classroom. So one of the major ones, of course, with our pandemic is technology. So now you're requiring students, if you integrate this into an LMS, you're requiring them to be able to navigate through your Blackboard course or Canvas Brightspace course. So you have to think about the access that they have. Do they have a computer? Do they have another device? What types of resources? I always provide that right in the beginning of the semester. And I do a little bit of a technology run through with them. You may have to set up separate meetings with students if they really have trouble accessing things. But you have to realize that the ability to write on, a computer and type something up and submit it, that's a very major part of any type of job right now that's going to be requiring writing. So they have to be able to do that. Having it all housed in LMS is really important, and teaching them how to do that is also, important part of that. And also, again, the idea of aligning that with course content. So you have to balance that out in your own mind. Can I use something that's already created and curated for me? Or will it just be better and take less time to just create my own course? For me, I had to use something I had to use two resources for basic college writing. I had to use something that would teach them the structure of research writing, as well as an anthology for them to react to. And also, just connecting them with library resources and teaching them how to use the library, how to use online resources is also a part of that course. Teaching them how to find material and appropriately cite it is a part of this course as well. So what could I do in the future with it? And as Erin was talking about at the beginning, when we were just talking, that there are some sessions today and have been through the week about creating your own OER materials with students. So there was a really interesting article by Marcus Quinn in 2016 that talked about creating multimedia resources for poetry, or how teachers have created their own resources and have taught students how to create their own resources. The idea of remixing and revising would definitely be something that I would like to experiment with more in the future, now that I've used it in the beginning of this, revising and remixing materials for students, and finding different levels of Creative Commons rights for remixes and the technical challenges of remixing and revising. Several articles in the last couple of years have talked about that, and how the implications of doing that with students and how that works. So in conclusion, when you align your course objectives with OER, students are going to start out day one with the tools for success in your course. It'll be all streamlined. It will be all in one place. Having it all housed in an LMS like this allows for easier navigation and the ability to go back and know where in the textbook you might have been talking about something, and it's all laid right out for you. And that's why I felt, using OER has been so transformative for me and my students. They've been able to have a place where they can just access everything and know exactly what I am doing week to week in their writing course. So I will open up the floor for any questions or comments.
Thank you so much, Stefanie. I put some of those resources you were sharing in the chat. but we also have a resource document for each session. So, you know, folks can go back and get those at any time. They can also save the chat if you're not familiar with that. There's 3 little gray dots at the bottom of your chat window. You can click on that to save the chat from today if you want any of those resources. There's some comments too. Others are also experiencing the same issues with their students for affordability and access. And you bring in the point about the equity and diversity that OER affords as well. So those are really important points for the why, right? If folks are wondering, why should I really kind of look into this and why is this important? How can it help my students all start, like you said, on day one, on the same page, with the same, opportunities for success. So I didn't have too many questions in the chat. Folks are welcome to unmute your mics if you'd like to chat with us. You can also type in the chat if you have any questions for Stefanie, or we'd love to also hear what you're doing if you are using OER in your classes.
I have a question. Stephanie, how do you deal with students who are taking your course on the phone?
Well,
Because it happens.
it does happen. And we have to think. It's like one of those, it depends on what you're doing and what you're trying to do.
How well do the materials work on a phone? Can they access what they need? Of course, it's not going to be as good as on a computer or an iPad, but what has been your experience with students who are taking your course on the phone?
So they can access definitely like the materials on these web pages. So they can access the anthology materials pretty well. Like that's the area, like just the access to the course materials on the phone is fine. The problem occurs more when you're starting to write a multiple page research paper and you're trying to do like a voice text with that. That's where we start to get into some, the actual writing of it. If you're doing like a short response like I did here, like if you're doing a short response to something like a 2-paragraph, they're pretty much okay with, using that on the phone somewhat. But then once it gets to a larger research paper, then that's when we start to get into, maybe you might want to use the computer lab to be able to do that. Also having it when in person. Yeah, that's the Blackboard. That's what Michael's saying. Within Blackboard, it starts to become a different story. So if they're doing like a Google Doc on their phone and they're writing it up, and then when they get to a computer, then they upload their Google Doc as like a Word doc file, then it's fine. But then once they start to get into like formatting for an MLA research paper, then you start to have to be able to be on a computer to do that, to be able to type that up and put all of your citations correctly and all of that. It starts to become a little bit more challenging. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I try to say to them, hey, when we're talking about these responses, yes, that's easy to be able to be done on a phone. But when we start to get into our papers, I like to get them started at least, and even do some of the citations right in the classroom on a computer. So then they're able to then do, some of the writing on their phone, but then also be able to do maybe some of the editing and structure of it on the computer. But you're right, like we have our students and they do have their phone. So maybe like, and that sometimes happens too, is like, let's say it's a very old phone, but let's just say they, they access the OER materials here on a second device and then they're writing. That's kind of nice, actually. Yeah, editing is very challenging on a phone. So they have to go to some sort of device at some point. So having, and sometimes students need to know those, like, where can they go to write? Where can they go to log in? How can I do this? Where is that access for me? Is there a way that I can loan something out? We have some we can loan out computers and devices for students. So sometimes they just need that direction too.
Thank you.
And I said, informal story is survey at Rockland. Students expressed appreciation. Yes. I mean, they would like to be able to access a lot of the different materials on their phones, but we have to also tell them that there comes a point where unless you have like a keyboard for your phone, you're going to need a keyboard at some point. So I have seen students do that too, where they'll purchase a keyboard for their phone and kind of create their own little computer that way.
Yeah, I think students more and more are using their phones because it has the capabilities to do all of this from the reading side and the writing side. It's just not particularly from the writing side as ideal, right? So it can be cumbersome. But as Michael's saying, all of this, the SUNY OER resources are mobile friendly. So any of those resources Stefanie was sharing with you can be read very easily right on a mobile phone.
Mm-hmm.
So that piece, right? And then of course, if you're using Blackboard, the Blackboard app is kind of wonky sometimes. And so being able to see your navigation menu to get back and forth to things might be problematic. But
yeah, so it's kind of like maybe what they can do, and that's something now that I'm thinking about what students have done. Some of them, what they'll do is they'll have a phone or tablet, they'll read the article, they'll have a notebook, and they'll write off of that, and then they'll come to class and they'll have things already written, handwritten, and then they'll come to class and they'll type. So I always have time in my classes just for them to type and to write. I feel that's so important, just time to type and write. And I'll be able to cycle around, talk to people, do like some mini conferences right there. And that's why I feel like, the ideal situation is having a computer lab. If you can have a computer lab for a course with OER and Blackboard integration, that's the ideal fitting for it, because then you can just have them say, okay, let's pull up the article on OER and everyone can look at it right now. And we could type right off of that right now too.
I've even had students who have sent me a photo of a handwritten paper, right? So they've written it like you've said on a notebook, and they've taken a photo with their phone and they've sent it to me. And I can mark it up as a first draft to be able to give them feedback because it's just an image. And so I can mark that up and still be able to give them that information. And then they can, hopefully get it, have a way to type it up for a final copy. But yeah, I've actually even gotten photographs of student work. So. Other questions or comments?
I'd just like to thank Dr. Schaefer for sharing all this useful information with me. So I teach at SUNY Orange in the Occupational Therapy Assistant Program. So we're doing a lot of clinical things in rehabilitation. If you don't write, you don't get paid. So it's directly, related. So it's nice for me to have these resources to give, because prior to this, I was pretty much saying, use your creative juices and get some words on the paper. So thank you very much.
Yes, not a problem. Definitely, like the guided writing could be used in any course. Really, I could see that even, being used in any type of writing intensive course, because whether you're using MLA citation or APA citation, it's right all there. So, and especially in a course like a medical course, you want to teach people how to write properly, how to communicate effectively. And if you have students that, let's say, are constantly writing run-on sentences, to be a great place where you could just link them right directly to that run-on sentence part and help them with that writing right there.
I think we also have we do. So on the SUNY OER textbook site, we also have a technical writing. There's a technical writing text, and there's a course there too, so you can look that over and Yeah, there it is. Thank you, Stephanie. So here, if you type in technical writing at the top, there is a textbook for that, and there's an actual course too where you can pick up modules. But like you were saying, Stephanie, when you look at the actual book, there are links to the different sections, and so you can put those directly into your learning management system. It doesn't have to go to the book and kind of piece through the sections and find it. You can direct them specifically to a certain area. And that's one of the other things I really like about that. Oh, yeah, right. So Mike is saying even a few of the SUNY writing centers use this OER as a reference guide.
Okay. Yeah. When you click on that. So, you know, it will be up to you as an instructor whether you want to create your own source. Like maybe for Richard here, he may want to create his own resource because it's occupational therapy. I'm not sure how many OER resources are out there specifically in occupational therapy. You may want to start to curate your own thing. And I know through University of Buffalo, they had like different levels of OER integration. I selected just the one just to adopt, given my circumstances. I wanted something that, you know, when I looked at it, I was just like, this is great. And I started looking at my objectives, course objectives, like, oh, I could use this for that, and then I could use this for that. And when I mapped it out, I was like, there was, you know, I didn't see an advantage at that point to creating my own resource. But, you know, I'm sure for different disciplines, you might want to create something and go into it. But it's something that this just shows you that the adoption process does not have to be daunting. It doesn't have to be a process where it's going to take hundreds and hundreds of hours of time to figure all this out. You could just look and see, you know, and start clicking in and seeing, hey, this looks pretty good. Like this pretty much covers what I wanted to cover. And then through maybe different iterations of the course, then think about, well, maybe I should tie in this resource or something like that in the future.
Yeah, there are really those three levels that you're highlighting, right? So to just adopt the resources as they are, you can adapt them to remix and revise to meet your needs, right? And then you can also just create your own from what's already available and add to that. So those are some different ways to get involved with really the beginnings of using OER in your courses. All right.
All right. Just looking to see if there's any other chats or anyone else that would like to speak.
Yeah, we have about 5 minutes. If anybody else wants to, feel free. I'm curious if others are using OER in their courses and what their experience has been.
I'm not sorry, really sure about the nature of my question, but it's just an observation. I've heard during the presentation that you had said that the ability for people to speak the text and for it to be transcribed and would be accepted, I think, as a written statement or as an answer to a module. Now, if we were, and I'm not doing any advertisements here, I had worked in the past with Dragon Speaking Naturally, but I'm also really amazed at the text that I see on the screen as the presenter is talking, as I am talking right now, the accuracy with which this is being transcribed. If maybe this is a question for Aaron or anybody who's behind this. I would love to know what software is being used for this. But going back to the nature of my question is, so we could accept from anybody, meaning an instructor would accept from anybody a spoken text and treat it as a written text, of course, bypassing spelling and there's still work that needs to be done, of course, on the text because it's raw in its nature. But that you would accept as an assignment to be handed back in, wouldn't you?
I mean, I would say yes, you would, but you would have to go through then the editing process. So if you're going to teach somebody how to use this tool, you have to also teach them, okay, yes, this did make it be more accessible to you, but you have to also go through the grammar and the structure of that later to be able to do it. But for some students, they have a problem, and I've seen it before, where the thought comes out of the mouth, but the thought can't come out of the hand. I don't know why. Like they can think it, they can speak it, they can communicate it, but as soon as the pencil goes in the hand, it just disappears.
Yep.
And that's why like voice typing has become so transformative. Like it's so amazing, because now you have people, and what it does is it could lessen their anxiety then to type later too. So maybe it's an anxiety, a writing anxiety issue. So now you can have people be able to, then they start to actually, they'll voice type a little bit, but they'll also type as well. But they don't have that fear that when they start to write, it's just going to all go away.
Right.
That's what I've seen with a lot of students, not just at the college level, but in my high school. As I've had students that a teacher will say to me, you know what, this student just can't write anything. And I said to them, well, have you ever tried voice typing with them? And they're like, voice typing? And I'm like, yeah, let's see what they do when they voice type. And all of a sudden, it's like something that was like this much they provided. Now they provide like a whole page of information.
Yes.
It just is, technology has opened up the world for that. And it would be the accommodations they would get in their workplace anyways. If they have a disability, they would get that accommodation as well.
Right. I have a feeling this is only a thought, less inhibition for when we're speaking the language, so to speak, as opposed to writing. And the second you are typing something, and then you see the mistake or the error or the redness in the text, that shows that the language is not fluid anymore in terms of how it's going to be. When you think about it in the past, we do know for some reason that the spoken word was uttered first before the written word could be committed, unfortunately, because quite often we see that teaching writing, they say, comes later in the learning process than, say, speaking the word. And unfortunately, that is what keeps us or keeps the thinker behind. As you said, you think the word, but the second you've committed to paper, then it's not as fluid, so to speak. Yes.
I'll give you an example. Also, I have a daughter who uses the the voice text to write, because when she writes with pen and paper, she actually skips words because her brain is moving faster than her hand can keep up. And so if she were to write something, it's really hard to make it out because it doesn't have all of it's not complete, right? And so she has the complete thoughts in her head, but to put them to paper, it's missing. And so when she just speaks it, she can actually watch it, just like we are watching the captioning. She can watch it typing out for her, and she can know when to stop and make corrections and that sort of thing. And to your question about the captioning, so this is built into Zoom, but also if you use Google Slides, there is a way when you are presenting Google Slides where you can enable that as well. So if you're doing that in your classroom, you're sharing a PowerPoint, you can turn on the live captioning in Google Slides as well.
All right, thank you.
Some things to think about. Well, I'm going to, because of time, wrap us up here for this, but thank you for your questions and your conversation. And also thank you to Dr. Schaefer for this great overview of ways that we can really kind of jump on board with OER and really benefit our students in many ways. Want to
Thank
draw
you.
attention to everybody that we have posted the recordings for the week, and this one will be added there later today. So the recordings are at the first URL here, and the second URL is our survey for the sessions, if you wouldn't mind. This session is closing right now, but we're going to leave the room open because we have a 12 o'clock and a 1 o'clock. So this room will be open all afternoon. You can stay here if you are joining us in another session, or you're welcome to leave and come back, but the room will be open.